From news and views, issues and opportunities, we'll have in-depth conversations with decision makers to find out what they know and what they think. I'm Rico Hizon, inviting you to join the exchange because your business is our business. Scientists have long sounded the alarm about an inevitable climate catastrophe. The world is warming at a faster rate from carbon discharge caused by rapid development. World leaders now meeting in Scotland are taking the cue by coming up with hard commitments to drastically cut carbon emissions until a net zero is reached in the next 30 years. And big business is also pitching in to address climate change. The vision for corporate sustainability and social responsibility in our C-suite vision. The 26th United Nations Climate Change Conference in Glasgow, Scotland wraps up its first week with big pledges from world leaders. What have been the major commitments so far and what more can we expect next week? Let's now have an exchange with CNN international correspondent Phil Black, straight from Glasgow. Phil, tell us, why is this COP26 climate conference in Glasgow important for you, me, the Philippines, and the world?
Well, Rico, I guess this is often described as the last best chance of making significant progress on taking climate action before it is simply too late. The science has never been clearer. The world has to dramatically cut its emissions this decade by around half if it's to have any chance of hitting carbon neutrality around the middle of the century and then therefore preventing the worst impacts of climate change. The goal, of course, is restricting average global temperature increase to 1.5 degrees. The world is nowhere near on track to achieving that. And so there is a sense of urgency here that real action is necessary. Otherwise, you, me, the rest of the world will suffer pretty serious consequences, life-changing consequences as a result of it.
Life-changing consequences indeed, Phil, but we are currently at the end of the first week of COP26. What commitments have been decided so far that will directly affect our daily lives, including Filipinos?
Well, I think the interesting thing about this week, it's the most glamorous week in a sense because it's when the leaders and other big names fly in, and the mood started in a fairly, it was pretty gloomy to begin with really, because we weren't expecting significant progress or any real added ambition from the leaders and the targets that they were prepared to offer here at this conference. What we did get though, in addition to the individual emissions cuts and the targets offered by individual countries, are these separate additional agreements targeting specific issues that are very much drivers of climate change. Things like deforestation, things like methane emission, things like near zero carbon steel production. These sorts of situations, these sorts of issues have seen large numbers of world leaders and countries team up together and make fairly ambitious pledges. Together, not enough to hit the required goals that'll keep us to 1.5 degrees Celsius of warming globally, but agreements that seem to give a sense of momentum and an understanding and a willingness to move in a way that perhaps has been lacking at previous COPs. So for that reason, there is a cautious optimism now that perhaps more can be achieved, not enough to secure the necessary targets, but perhaps at least enough to keep the process alive so that people can come back perhaps in a year or two and try and drive that ambition even further, Rico.
But Phil, what are still the likely sticking points between the developed and developing countries in the last week of the conference that maybe we could say this COP26 will be a success and we don't have to wait for the next one to come?
Well, there's a couple of key headline issues, of course. One are the individual emissions targets. We know that's not going to be enough, but if they are able to close the gaps a little, make some progress, see a little bit more ambition from a couple of key polluting countries, that will add a sense of momentum. Finance is the other big sticking point, particularly the issue that really divides developing countries and wealthier countries. This responsibility, which is built into the process, that says rich countries will help poorer developing countries financially both mitigate and develop greener economies, but also adapt to the inevitable consequences of the climate change that is happening now and will continue to happen. We know there is that core promise of $100 billion a year to go to developing countries. That was supposed to be delivered by 2020. We know that hasn't happened, and we're talking about as late as perhaps 2023 before that does happen. But there is a hope that perhaps over the coming week or so that is left, that time frame can be brought back. And that's important because it speaks to the sense of trust that exists in this process, the willingness that developing countries have to trust and believe in the other commitments that developed countries are making, perhaps when it comes to emissions reductions and so forth. So it's a core issue, and it's a very emotive issue, and there is a lot of hope that perhaps that gap can be significantly closed in the remaining days, Rico.
Phil, Russia and China, two major polluters, are not in Glasgow for COP26. How crucial is their non-attendance for the developed and for the developing countries to make key decisions on this ongoing climate crisis?
Well, it is absolutely a source of disappointment that both of those countries, their leaders did not come here, and in addition to that, their individual commitments to reducing emissions didn't really change much. They did not live up to hope of what they possibly could be. So what that means is the conference just simply has to carry on without them, in the hope that if they are able to make progress here, that then increases the pressure on China and Russia and other countries that haven't really moved their targets significantly to take bigger, more ambitious action. It's really the only option they have available to them. Make more progress here, set the direction internationally, and the idea is that these countries must follow and deliver more in the next year or so. Rico.
Phil Black, CNN International's correspondent in Glasgow, Scotland at COP26 Climate Conference. Thank you so much for joining us on The Exchange. And share your thoughts about our topic tonight. What can we do to address climate change? Send your comments to our official social media pages and I will read your responses later in the program. And now here's a rundown of this week's top business stories. The country's economic hub is now under alert level 2 beginning Friday. And this means businesses in Metro Manila can accommodate more customers. Indoor and outdoor karaoke bars, clubs, concert halls, and kids' amusement centers are now open with limited capacity. Inflation was slower at 4.6% in October from 4.8% in the previous month. Prices of meat, vegetables, and fish increased at a slower pace, but fuel prices rose faster, pushing up transportation costs. And more Filipinos were out of work in September due to varying restrictions. The Philippine Statistics Authority said 4.25 million Filipinos lost their jobs, and that's higher than the 3.88 million in August. The national unemployment rate now stands at 8.9%, the highest for the year. And straight ahead on The Exchange, where your business is our business. Netflix subscribers with a competitive streak and those who want downtime in between streaming will love this new feature. And we talked to an advocacy group for climate justice about what the country can still do to lower pollution levels and address other environmental problems. Keep it right here on CNN Philippines. News you can use, news you can trust. Glad you're staying with us right here on The Exchange, where your business is our business. I'm Rico Hizon. An automotive company is seeing a boom in purchases of second-hand cars and warranty services to protect buyers and sellers. In my interview on The Final Word, GT Capital Auto Chairman Vince Soco said the used car market has grown stronger compared to the new car market before the pandemic. Soco said the industry is optimistic sales will pick up as mobility restrictions gradually ease.
The need for alternative personal mobility in the wake of the pandemic drove people to buy cars and vehicles, new or used. So we believe and are confident that the road forward will include autos and commercial vehicles, because without mobility, there can be no economic recovery.
Soco also said any brand that has an official local distributor can avail of their premium warranty services. Climate activists continue to press world leaders to act fast to prevent a climate crisis. According to the government, the country lost around $10 billion, or around half a trillion pesos, over the past decade due to climate-related hazards. So what does this mean for ordinary Filipinos? Let's now have an exchange with Philippine Movement for Climate Justice National Coordinator Ian Rivera. Thank you so much for joining us halfway around the world, Ian. Leaders from developed and developing countries are at odds over how to resolve this climate crisis. In the Philippines, how does this impact you, me, and our kababayans?
It really impacted a lot to many Filipinos, particularly that we experience frequent typhoons, and the typhoons are getting strong. And not only that, there are severe floodings. Rains carry with it so much water that we experience several floodings in key areas and cities in the Philippines. And also we are experiencing sea level rise. And this coming November 8th, it's the Yolanda commemoration, and people, the victims of Typhoon Yolanda, are still battling for survival.
Ian, from what you just have said, the Philippines is one of the nations in the world highly at risk from the effects of this climate crisis. What needs to be done?
The world leaders must have to address immediately to the reduction of the greenhouse gas emission. And that's the number one, and it's being inscribed in the Paris Agreement. At the rate that greenhouse gas are emitted, we will go beyond what is allowable and what is the target, which is 1.5 degrees average global temperature. So the call right now is an immediate reduction of greenhouse gas, and this is several times been reiterated by the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change.
And the Philippines, Ian, has made a commitment and is trying to achieve a goal of reducing greenhouse gas emissions by 75% by the year 2030. Can it be done?
Based on that target, it's really a low target for the Philippine government in terms, if we are going to compare that with the Paris Agreement commitments, and it's very low. And based on the evaluation of our commitment, we will never be on track on the 1.5 based on the Philippine targets.
So what should be the new goal? How should we reduce greenhouse gas emissions to be able to attain this target of bringing the target down to 1.5 degrees?
Yeah, for the Philippines, since our energy is still very dependent on coal and fossil fuel, the immediate target is to phase out coal, particularly, before 2030. And that means that we should have a strong renewable entering into the energy mix before 2030. So that's the target. And there should also be a energy transition plan that should be implemented by the Department of Energy to phase out the existing operational coal prior to 2030. That
How
should be phased out.
aggressive are Filipino companies right now in moving forward with renewable energy, Ian?
It's there are movements in terms of renewable energy, but in terms of what is being required by the climate treaty, it's very snail paced because of so many obstacles. Because of there are not much policies that push renewable energy in order to take over the energy mix occupied by coal and fossil fuel. So we really need to do this at a very fast pace. The laws are there, but it's not enforced. There are still policy gaps for renewable energy to really take a center stage in our energy transition.
You have the Renewable Energy Act of 2008 and the Biofuels Act of 2006. So why are these laws to promote renewable energy not implemented and enforced properly?
This is the subject of the case that we filed against Department of Energy. And this is a case on continuing mandamus where we argue that the implementing rules and regulation for important provisions of the renewable energy to be implemented are not being fleshed out by the Department of Energy. And we filed that case way back 2017. So Department of Energy has not prioritized implementing the rules and regulation in order to guide renewable energy players in providing the necessary energy mix of our country.
Thank you for this climate change exchange. Ian Rivera, National Coordinator of the Philippine Movement for Climate Justice. And now moving on to our social media accounts, we asked you, what can we do to address climate change? And here are your responses. Gian Garma says governments and companies must be held more responsible than consumers. He suggests investing in renewable energy and pushing for sustainable production in industries and agriculture. He also cites the need for laws and policies that will enable these solutions. For Ruben Reyes, addressing climate change means electing government officials who are honest and committed to taking steps to address environmental issues. We would like to thank all of you for sharing your thoughts with us. Continue joining the discussion right here on our official social media pages. And still ahead on The Exchange, where your business is our business. Looking for a home makeover in this pandemic? A famous Swedish furniture store opens its digital doors to Filipinos. And a company embraces sustainability into its business model. Hear about its eco-friendly plans right here on CNN Philippines. News you can use, news you can trust. Glad you're staying with us right here on The Exchange, where your business is our business. I'm Rico Hizon. Here's a rundown now of this week's latest news in technology. A cryptocurrency inspired by the widely popular South Korean Netflix series Squid Game turns out to be a scam. The digital currency called Squid surged more than $2,800 before it crashed to zero on Monday, according to CoinMarketCap. Its developers reportedly cashed out on the investments, running off with more than $2 million. Squid was billed as a token that can be used for a new online game that's also based on the South Korean show featuring a deadly tournament of children's games. Well, the games have begun at Netflix Video Games. That is, the streaming service has launched its new mobile gaming platform for Android devices, including Stranger Things 1984, Stranger Things 3, the game, Shooting Hoops, Card Blast, and Teeter Up. Netflix says the games will be available on the iOS platform very soon. As one company says hello to new features, another says goodbye to a function that verifies their user's identity. Facebook says it is shutting down its facial recognition software, and with this, delete data associated with over 1 billion people's faces. The function, which automatically recognizes people in photos and videos, has previously faced backlash for compromising user privacy and having underlying racial bias. From simply encouraging ordinary citizens to reduce, reuse, and recycle, the fight against climate change has shifted to seeking more responsibility and accountability from big corporations. And one of the country's largest conglomerates has pledged to contribute to commitments in the fight against global warming. Its energy arm is making waves in pushing for the use of renewables. Let's now have an exchange with AC Energy President and CEO John Eric Francia. Eric, thank you so much for joining us. Why is your group making aggressive investments in the renewable energy space?
Yeah, hi, Rico. Ayala Group stands for sustainability. We are at the forefront of sustainability, as you very well know, and we've recognized this huge need ever since we started AC Energy 10 years ago. But we really stepped up the efforts about 4 to 5 years ago when we saw renewables getting more and more competitive in terms of pricing and increase in efficiencies of technology. So we also recently committed to net zero from an Ayala standpoint, as well as an AC Energy standpoint. So again, we're going all in on renewables, and I think it's what the world needs today.
And when you talk about renewable energy, the choices are solar, wind, hydro, geothermal, and biomass. In which renewable space is the group heavily investing in right now?
Yeah, our main technologies, Rico, are solar and wind. We do have some investments in geothermal, relatively small, but we're focusing on solar and wind. So solar accounts for about 65% of our renewable portfolio, and wind accounts for about 35 to 40%.
And your goal?
And I think globally, that's what we see as well. The significant rise in renewables has been driven by solar and wind, because you can build it practically anywhere, especially for solar. And then wind, you've got a lot of locations as well with good wind regimes.
And your goal is to reach 5,000 megawatts of renewable capacity by 2025. Give us an example, the area of coverage of these 5,000 megawatts.
Yeah, well, as a general rule, Rico, 1 megawatt of solar plant requires around 1 hectare. It used to be much higher than that. Now it's actually slightly lower than 1 hectare. And the reason for that is that technology has improved over time. So you need less square footage of space for solar. Wind as well is increasing in terms of efficiency. So before we used to have some 1.6 megawatts per turbine. Now we're building wind farms with 5 megawatts per turbine, for example. So technology has improved by a factor of 3 times, both for wind and solar over time. So I think it's getting more and more feasible and viable. Obviously, Rico, the holy grail of renewables, the need to unlock the potential of renewables is battery storage. Renewables can only be scaled up so much without the support of battery storage, because renewables is still intermittent or variable. So you need battery storage to stabilize it and to make it more dependable.
And Eric, no, for our kababayans who are watching us right now, who receive their electricity consumption bills every month, what does renewable energy and pricing mean for them?
Yeah, well, increasingly, Rico, it should allow for more stable pricing moving forward, especially because renewable is fixed. There's a zero variable cost. Now, there's zero fuel cost. All your cost is driven by your capital expenditure. So you don't pass on fuel costs. That's the good thing about renewables, especially what we've seen in the past few months is global fossil fuel prices shot through the roof, never seen before, be it coal, oil, or gas. So it really makes renewables much more competitive in terms of pricing. But again, we live in a volatile world. 1 year coal is very cheap, and 1 year like this year, it's very expensive. So, but renewables, there's a steady decline of prices. So over the long term, you expect a stable and decreasing cost of electricity.
AC Energy is committed to renewables. We were just talking earlier to Ian Rivera from the Philippine Movement for Climate Justice. He says that the government and the country is not doing enough in improving its renewable energy sources. How can we push this even forward and make more companies invest in renewable energy?
Yeah, I think the appetite is already there, Rico. So we've got the policies in place, the renewable energy law. I think there's still a need to enforce a lot of these policies. I don't want to get too technical about this, but we're still waiting, for example, for the renewable energy market to come alive, where you can trade those green certificates, right? So that's part of the renewable energy law, but it hasn't been implemented yet. Also, the reserve market, where you can have an open and competitive bidding for ancillary services, that's not up yet. Again, that's part of the framework design of EPIRA. So again, given that renewable energy should be complemented by ancillary plants to stabilize the grid, we need these markets to be implemented. But the private sector is very well prepared to roll out a lot of these projects. There's a lot of appetite in terms of green financing to support a lot of the renewable projects. And then lastly, I would say that the transmission needs to be upgraded. I know that NGCP is trying its best to upgrade the network, but that's definitely key in terms of bringing in all of this additional capacity from renewables.
Thank you so much for this Renewable Energy Exchange, John Eric Francia, the President and CEO of AC Energy. And before we go, here's some good news for online shoppers. Filipinos can now order items from Swedish furniture maker IKEA 24/7. It officially opened its online store on Wednesday, and this is ahead of the opening of its physical store in Pasay City this quarter. IKEA said popular items are those under the home storage and workspace categories. Filipinos stuck at home during the pandemic invested to decorate and organize their homes and set up personal spaces for remote work. And this is the exchange who makes sense of the facts and the figures and the ups and downs of the business cycle, because your business is our business. I'm Rico Hizon. Thanks for watching CNN Philippines. News you can use. News you can trust.